Hello there, I'm Noel Hacegaba, Chief Operating Officer at the Port of Long Beach. Welcome to Supply Chain Insight, where we discuss the latest news, issues, and trends in the supply chain with top industry leaders, experts, and influencers. Our objective is to bring you the insight you need to help you keep your cargo moving. Today's business executives expect a lot from their supply chains: efficiency, velocity, flexibility, cost management, and operational excellence. Supply Chain Insight brings the supply chain to you, one segment at a time, to explore new approaches and innovative solutions that will help you and the Port of Long Beach deliver greater value to our customers and partners. In today's episode, I'm excited to talk with Reinke, President and CEO of IANA, the Intermodal Association of North America. Anne joined IANA from Transportation Intermediaries Association, where she served as President and CEO between 2020 and 2024. Prior to that, she served as the Deputy Assistant Secretary for Congressional Affairs at the U.S. Department of Transportation and spent 16 years at CSX Corporation in their Federal Affairs Office as Vice President of Government Affairs. Before joining CSX, Anne worked at the Association of American Railroads and High Speed Ground Transportation Association. Anne is a Washington, D.C. native, received her BA from Rice University and a JD degree from the Wake Forest University School of Law. Anne, welcome to Supply Chain Insight. Thank you for joining us and sharing your insights with us today.
Thank you so much. And you know what? I'm only 25 after doing all of those things. It's pretty impressive.
I was about to say,
appreciate you having me.
You started very, very young.
Very young, very young.
And you've been leading IANA for about 7 months now, and you hit the ground running. And I know that you've been fully immersed and engaged since you assumed your role. So tell us about your experience so far and what you've been up to.
My predecessor, whom you know well, Joni Casey, set me up for tremendous success. We have a very strong internal structure. We have a very strong revenue positive, budget. So what I heard from the board upon my hiring is take those strengths and start fanning out publicly. Meaning, we know IANA, we appreciate IANA, we need more people to appreciate and know IANA. And as a commensurate to that, know and appreciate the intermodal industry. I think I've been told a few times by a few different board members, our market share went down during COVID, which is remarkable when you think about all that was coming at us during COVID, and you know better than anyone else about that. And so how can we get it back up there? And part of it, I think, is taking on more awareness in a couple of different facets. So I am blessed that it's the association is in such a strong position so that we can actually take it to the next level.
And you're certainly doing that. I see you meeting with different folks across the country, members, legislators, et cetera. And I really appreciate the fact that you've been given that freedom by the board to do just that. How would you describe, based on all these meetings and touch points that you've had so far, how would you describe the state of intermodal? And what are you hearing from the members?
Well, the best sort of conglomeration of members that I saw was at the May business meeting in Kansas City. And so that's our smaller meeting, really, where it's for kind of the in the weeds discussion about what affects our industry from a safety perspective, security, operational, et cetera. And so to a person, they were very, very concerned about economic uncertainty and economic uncertainty writ large because of, and we all know, right, trade, tariffs, what's going on with regulations, what's going on with consumer spending, are we going to have greater inflation, et cetera. And because of that uncertainty, they don't know how much to invest and they don't know how much to hire, or should they be letting people go? All of that can be very paralyzing. And so I think the good news, the bright spot here is the consumer still seems remarkably unaffected. It's gone down a little bit, but it's still holding fairly strong. But there has been an impact overall on intermodal. And so that's really what I have been hearing about is if we're going to grow intermodal, we want to make sure that we're in the most stable environment we can be.
And that's a great segue to the next question, and certainly trade policy and tariffs. I mean, you joined IANA at a very interesting time. Trade policy and tariffs are certainly top of mind for anyone in supply chain. Here in Long Beach, as you pointed out a moment ago, we're seeing the effects of on cargo volumes firsthand. Following 11 consecutive months of year-over-year increases, we saw our first monthly decline in May. That was about minus 8.2% year over year, and driven largely by a drop in imports. And then that was followed by a sharper decline in June. We saw about a 16.4% year over year decline. So all of that front loading of cargo that started last year has now slowed down. How has that translated into intermodal activity for the first half of 2025?
You're exactly right. That what your experience is sort of mimicked in our numbers. And so what we saw was an excellent first quarter. I mean, truly remarkable, right? Everyone's front loading, and they're front loading for rational reasons because they're not sure what the environment was going to be in terms of trade and tariffs. And so they wanted to get ahead of that and make sure they had the inventory to sustain it. So now what we've seen, particularly in June, has been a reduction in volumes, both domestically and internationally, but more significantly so in international. Now, will there be I am not a soothsayer. I do not have a crystal ball, so I do not know what will happen next. But so far, the sort of the deadlines for these tariffs keep shifting, and so now we're to August 1st. And one hopes, and I think that's reflected in the stock market, one hopes that it will not actually occur, that we will not have these really, truly significant tariffs, because that will be fairly, it's not going to be harmful necessarily to everybody, but it could be potentially harmful to some of our members.
And just for the record, I don't have a crystal ball either. And even if I did, I don't think it would be that effective. I mean, as you pointed out, the starts and stops, the pauses, the announcements, and then the pauses and the extensions keeps moving the goalpost down. Despite a slow May and June, container volumes at the Port of Long Beach were still 10% higher than they were for the first half of the year compared to last year, January through June. And last year was a record year for us. In fact, Long Beach led the nation in container volumes between January and April of this year. And based on all the information that we have and what we're hearing from shippers and shipping lines, we are projecting a decline between 5 and 10% for the second half of 2025. So if you combine that, if that sticks, and you combine that with the first half of 2025, we're still going to be at or around record levels, which is phenomenal. And then you pointed out just a moment ago that consumer spending has not declined or slowed the way that many were projecting. In fact, I just saw a report this week that consumer spending continues to be robust, defying a lot of expectations by economists early on. So what is your expectation? Again, not putting you on the spot, not asking you to roll out your crystal ball, but what is your expectation for the second half of 2025 for intermodal specifically?
Well, we have a good friend, Larry Gross,
Yes.
who does all of our sort of economic analysis, and his sense is it's going to be flat. So he's not necessarily saying it's trending down, to your point, but he thinks it will be flat. And so why is that? Well, I think there are a lot of components as part of that. Again, we don't know if all the inventory that was front loaded, if we don't need any for peak season, what we typically call peak season, which is fall. So are we not going to see that, right? That's, I think, one thing that he's thinking about. And then are people still going to be spending as much on goods if there is some sort of inflationary shock? We know that Jerome Powell seems to be safe so far, the Fed today. We don't know if that changes, and then what the impact, will there be a ripple effect on the marketplace? So I think being cautious is probably smart in that respect. Or is it this, or you put out a finger and look for the winds to see what's happening?
Yeah, I think these days you got to put out two fingers, right? No, and it's good to hear that you there at IANA, and certainly Larry, who we know as the intermodalist, sounds like your projections are in line with ours, and that's again just based on what we're seeing, what we're hearing, and what we're hearing from shippers and shipping lines. So let's talk about policy. What role does IANA play in advocacy when it comes to policies and regulations that affect the intermodal industry?
Sure. So typically before I started, IANA would take on roles, sort of advocacy roles where every single member aligned. And so, as you know, we have a very disparate membership, right? We have motor carriers, we have ocean carriers, we we have railroads, we have ports, we've got the chassis providers, we've got all the manufacturers of these components, et cetera. And so there are not necessarily that many issues where they align. I think what I seek to change is to find all of those common denominators and really have us get out there and talk about kind of our strength as an industry, because what our strength as an industry is we have visibility into the whole supply chain, from the ocean carrier to the dray carrier and everything in between. And we're mode neutral so that we don't necessarily have a bias towards a particular mode, because we know they all have to work in concert with one another. Where we really have sought to get in front of folks this year is a couple things. One, we got involved with cargo theft, and we can talk a lot about that. That's something, this insidious increase in cargo theft that's affecting all of our modes, and it's truly an unfortunate situation, because the enforcement has been, it can't keep up with the cargo theft, right? So that's one thing. The independent contractor issue that we all know about. Many of our draymen are independent contractors, meaning they don't work for a trucking company. There are some states and even the federal government in the last administration that is trying to sort of contain that population, make it smaller. And so that's something that we get concerned about. And then this coming year is a surface transportation reauthorization bill. They used to call it the highway bill. And so that's where all these funding programs come, like the port infrastructure development grants, which help you all out, the highway intermodal connectors that come out of the highway bill. So all of these things are things that we're trying to get involved in. One port related or sort of tariff and trade related thing, we did join a community of associations that was concerned about one of the proposals from the U.S. trade representative that would have charged Chinese vessels a fee for every single port they went into the United States. And fortunately, that has now been changed, that proposal has been amended. I know that probably would have concerned you all greatly as well. And so it's nice to see that when you take action, actually you can influence the debate.
Yeah, great point. And it's nice to see IANA at the table, like you said, advocating, but also shaping, right, a lot of these regs and policies, because you truly are in a unique situation, because you represent all the modes. You represent the entire supply chain, if you will, and taking on some of these issues that affect all modes is critical. So I'm really glad that IANA is at the table, glad that you're taking that leadership role as well with USTR and other policies. So advocacy is just one way that IANA supports the intermodal industry. And for those in our viewing audience who may not be as familiar with IANA, tell us about your mission and how your efforts support and promote the intermodal industry.
Yeah, I mean, just as you said, the mission is to support and promote the intermodal industry, but I think we have an underlying mission, and maybe I'm more keenly aware of it. I think it's to grow market share, right? So if it's gone down over the last 5 years, what can we do to boost it? And so there are many things we already do today, right? We provide a lot of data that gives folks insights into our marketplace. We provide education that gives people insights into the industry and how to succeed in the industry. And we have phenomenal networking opportunities, particularly in Long Beach, California, which we'll talk about in a minute. But really, we want to raise awareness writ large. And so you and I, fortunately, are part of a committee that's looking at how we can raise attention through public relations. So if you're thinking about what are the tools in the toolkit to grow awareness, to make sure that there is a better understanding of the benefits of intermodal, to then commensurately grow intermodal market share, advocacy is one, PR is one, education is one, and data and sort of thought leadership is one. And so we're hiring an economist because our dear Larry Gross, who I just mentioned, says he has to retire. Unforgivable, Larry. But so we're going to hire an economist. We're really excited about that opportunity. And so that's really my mission is, yes, support and promote, but also grow.
Yeah, well said. And, the Port of Long Beach is proud to be a longstanding member of IANA. I've also had the pleasure of serving on the board of directors and was fortunate enough to serve as chairman. So I've seen up close the work of IANA and the positive impact on the intermodal industry. And I see with your leadership that you guys are really just taking this to the next level. And it's really good to see it's the right time to do that. In fact, in less than 2 months, and you alluded to this, you will be here along with the team for the annual Intermodal Expo. This is the intermodal industry's flagship event that brings industry leaders, innovative startups, engaged professionals from all modes of the intermodal industry together. And so a question for you, for those who may not have attended Expo in the past. So what makes this different? What sets the Expo apart from other industry conferences, and what can attendees expect to hear at this year's Expo?
Sure. So I think, and you please add on to whatever I miss. Since I have attended it, I have not sort of held court over it. My observation and from what I've seen and what I've heard is it's really everybody who you'd ever want to talk to in the intermodal space. They are all together in one place. So it is a fantastic opportunity to find out, what do your customers want? What are your competition? What is your competition doing that you're not actually doing? What is it that we see in the marketplace that we haven't necessarily been paying attention to yet? What are the new vendors in this space that could potentially provide greater efficiencies for our operation? So it's all of those things. And this, we provide speakers that speak to really critical issues like cargo theft, for example, and things that people care about. And you have the things that people care about and the people that you need to talk to all in one place together. One of my board members, Shelly, Shelly Austin, she mentioned how she sort of felt like it was speed dating because you're like talking to people, you're talking to so many people, and you're just trying to figure them all out. You're trying to figure, exactly what do you need to do next? What are your takeaways?
No, that's a great analogy. As a matter of fact, I know there's a lot of matchmaking that goes on during IANA, and that's a great reason why a lot of companies should consider being exhibitors, right, at the Expo. Right. So during the Expo, you'll also be hosting a student case competition. Now, this is a great way to expose college students to our industry and also some of our biggest challenges. And it's also a good way to connect current leaders with future ones. So tell us about IANA's role in preparing and investing in the next generation of freight and intermodal leaders.
One of the wonderful things about my predecessor, Jody Casey, is that she also was so committed to a scholarship program. And so we've provided more than $5 million in scholarships to kids across the country who are in university sort of supply chain programs. And it's kind of a win-win in that, yes, we have Larry Gross or others who put a problem together, a case, if you will, that really is truly affecting the intermodal industry. And then these kids, they're kids to me. They don't think they're kids, but I think they're kids. They come together and they try to figure out what a potential solution is. Yeah. And so not only do they do that on their own time in their university setting, but then they are able to come and present the cases to the people who sit on the scholarship committee and any others who are interested. And so how phenomenal is that? Because then this generation of folks are people that we can potentially recruit for to become part of the industry, and we potentially have a problem solved, right? So it truly is a win-win.
It really is. And it's really great to see Joni's legacy continue, right? And let me tell you, Ann, all the years that I've been at IANA and I've been involved in this case competition, I have just been impressed by the caliber of students that the Expo attracts and the seriousness with which they approach this. So it's just a fantastic way, like you said, to bring in the future generation of supply chain professionals and leaders and expose them early on. So how can folks learn more about IANA and the Intermodal Expo?
Well, so I'm Gen X, so I always have to lead with the email and that kind of stuff, right? Like if I were slightly younger, I'd say, well, our handles on X and
I know the feeling. We're in the same boat.
I don't really know. I don't. We're somewhere, but no. So if you go to intermodal.org, that will have all the information. I think it also has our handles there, like LinkedIn and all that stuff. But we're on LinkedIn, we're on Instagram, we're on X, we're all of those places. You can find me on LinkedIn if you want to connect with me. I'm on there quite a bit, as you mentioned. And why do I do that? Because I want to make sure that our membership knows how valuable our members are. So I highlight our members that I go visit, and B, what we're actually up to, so they can see, all right, there's a return on our investment here. People are sort of working on our behalf. We had Donna Lem, one of our board members, testifying last week. We're so excited for her to testify. So we were able to, take a picture and shoot that out, and she did a phenomenal job.
Yeah, she really did. And I really appreciate you posting all of your efforts to make sure that not just the members, but the entire industry is aware of what IANA is doing in support of the industry. And we'll make sure that we have your website and all the handles on the screen as well for our viewing audience. And thanks again for joining us on Supply Chain Insight and for sharing your helpful insights with our viewing audience. I look forward to seeing you and the rest of the IANA team at Intermodal Expo here in Long Beach. And I
less than 2 months.
Less than 2 months. And this is a place to be. Like you said, the who's who of the industry is going to be here. Great way to network, great way to speed date, as Shelley would say. And so I certainly look forward to seeing you and the team here. To our valued audience, thanks again for joining us. And we'll see you again soon for another episode of Supply Chain Insight, brought to you by the Port of Choice, the Port of Long Beach.